Story 1: The Copy Machine. You know that specific kind of silence you only get in a big office building late at night. It's not peaceful, it's heavy. It feels like the air is thicker and every little noise, the hum of the vending machine, the settle of the foundation, sounds way too loud. I used to think that creepy feeling was just me being paranoid. Now I know it was a warning. My name is Jason, and up until last week, I worked the graveyard shift doing data entry for a mid-sized logistics company out in the suburbs. It was boring, solitary work, just me and the glow of 3 monitors from midnight to 8. The incident started on a Tuesday morning around 3:00 a.m. I needed to scan some shipping manifests before I could log them. The goods scanner in the main bullpen was down for maintenance, which meant I had to use the beast. That's what we call the ancient beige copier shoved in the back corner near the emergency exit and the seldom used break room. This thing was a relic from the 90s. It smelled like hot ozone and dust whenever you turned it on, and it made a sound like it was chewing gravel. I hated being back there. The lighting was bad, one of those fluorescent tubes that constantly flickered pink at the edges, and it was always freezing. I walked back there, the only sound my sneakers squeaking on the linoleum. The beast was already on, sitting in standby mode, its little green power light pulsing slowly like a breathing animal. I shuddered a little. I didn't remember anyone using it earlier, and usually it was left off. I lifted the heavy lid, placed my first document on the glass, and hit the big green button. The machine roared to life. The scanner bar lit up with that blinding, alien green light and slowly dragged across the glass. It took forever. Then, the rollers engaged, and it spat a page into the output tray. I picked it up to check the scan quality. It wasn't my shipping manifest. The entire page was solid black, soaked in toner. It was still warm. Right in the center of the blackness was a tiny, almost microscopic white dot. I figured it was just a glitch. This thing was 20 years old after all. I crumpled the page, tossed it in the recycling bin, and tried again. Whir chunk chunk, ZZZZT. Another page slid out, solid black, but this time the white dot in the middle was slightly bigger. It looked like a blurry thumbprint. A cold spike of adrenaline hit my stomach. It's hard to explain why that was so scary in the moment, but standing alone in that flickering light, holding that warm, ruined paper felt deeply wrong. I lifted the lid to check the glass. It was perfectly clean. No smudges, no dust. "Come on, piece of junk," I whispered, trying to steady my nerves. I decided to try one last time before giving up. I hit copy. The machine seemed to strain this time, the internal gears grinding louder than before. The paper ejected. It wasn't black this time. It was a grainy, high-contrast photograph. My blood turned to ice. The photo was taken from a high angle looking down. It showed the back corner of the office. It showed the beast. And standing in front of it, looking at a piece of paper, was me. It was a security camera perspective. But there were no cameras in that hallway. I knew that for a fact. I'd asked security about it when I first started working nights. I looked closer at the grainy image, my hands shaking so badly the paper rattled. In the photo, the hallway behind me wasn't empty. Standing just at the edge of the frame, near the dark rectangle of the emergency exit door, was a shape. It looked human but wrong, too tall. Its limbs were blurry, like they were vibrating fast, and where its face should have been, there was just a swirling vortex of black toner ink. I whipped around to look at the emergency door behind me. Nothing, just the red glow of the exit sign. I looked back at the paper. The timestamp burned into the bottom corner of the photo read, 03:17:45 a.m. I pulled my phone out of my pocket. The time was 3:16 a.m. The machine had printed a picture of the immediate future. I couldn't move. My brain was screaming at me to run back to the main bullpen, grab my keys and leave. But my body was frozen in sheer terror. I I just watched the seconds tick by on my phone screen. 3:17:00, 3:17:30. As the time hit 3:17:45, the lights in the hallway cut out completely. Total darkness, except for the green standby light of the copier. Then, without me touching it, the beast woke up. The cooling fans roared to maximum speed. The green scanner light flared on, impossibly bright, casting long, swinging shadows down the hallway. Schlaxes is easy tea. Schlaxes is easy tea. Schlaxes is easy tea. Pages started flying out of the machine, one after another, littering the floor around my feet. I was paralyzed, staring at the glass lid. The green scanner bar was moving back and forth frantically, lighting up something that was now standing on the other side of the copier. I could only see it in flashes as the light passed. A tattered sleeve, gray, dead-looking skin, and then a face right up against the glass, illuminated from below. It had no eyes, just empty sockets dripping black ink, and a mouth stretched open too wide, filled with needle-like teeth that looked like shredded metal. It wasn't scanning a document, it was scanning me. That broke the paralysis. I screamed, a sound I didn't know I could make, and bolted. I didn't even look back. I ran through the pitch-black office, tripping over chairs, slamming through the double doors of the main entrance and out into the parking lot. I didn't stop running until I reached my car. I locked the doors and sped away, tires screeching. I quit the next morning over email. I didn't care about the 2 weeks' notice. I left my favorite coffee mug and a spare jacket at my desk. There was no way I was going back in there. I'm working retail now, day shifts only. It pays less and dealing with customers sucks, but it's better than the alternative. But the fear hasn't gone away. Sometimes when I have to make a copy for a customer and the machine starts whirring, I get a flash of that green light and I can smell hot ozone. And I wonder what else that machine printed out after I ran away into the dark. Story 2, the boss's secret. I honestly wish I just let the water ruin the carpets that night. I wish I grabbed my keys, walked out the door, and never looked back. Because knowing the truth is way worse than just being fired. My name's Ryan, and about 6 months ago, I took a graveyard shift doing inventory data entry for a small logistics company just outside of Phoenix. It was good money for mindless work, and I needed the cash. The owner, Mr. Henderson, was this quiet, older guy. He always wore the same slightly baggy gray suit and left at exactly 6 p.m. every night. He was decent enough to work for, but he had one incredibly strict rule. Nobody, under any circumstances, was allowed into his private back office. The door was heavy solid oak with a deadbolt that looked serious. We all joked that he was hiding a massive porn stash or maybe just sleeping in there during the day. You know, normal boss stuff. Last Thursday, Henderson left in a real hurry around 5 in the afternoon. He looked pale, sweating. About 2 hours into my shift, around 1 a.m., a pipe burst in the ceiling of the main hallway. It was a mess. Water was pouring down, creeping toward his office door. I panicked. I called his cell 3 times, straight to voicemail. If his important files got soaked, I knew I'd be the one blamed for not acting. I grabbed a bucket and ran to his door, trying the handle just in case, fully expecting it to be locked. It turned. He'd left in such a rush he forgot the deadbolt. I pushed the door open. The air inside was freezing cold, much colder than the rest of the building, and it smelled strangely metallic, like copper pennies. At first glance, it looked normal, just a big mahogany desk and some filing cabinets. I started moving boxes away from the door to protect them from the water. As I shoved a heavy cardboard box aside, I bumped into a tall bookshelf against the back wall. It didn't wobble, it swung open. It wasn't bolted to the wall, it was a hidden door. My heart started hammering against my ribs. It was that primal you shouldn't be here feeling. But curiosity is a dangerous thing. I stepped into the hidden space. It was a tiny, windowless closet, illuminated only by the blue glow of monitors. The walls were covered in them. 8 or 9 screens, all showing live feeds in low light. I stepped closer, the air catching in my throat. The feeds weren't security cameras for the warehouse. They were bedrooms, living rooms, kitchens. I recognized the first one immediately. It was my coworker Sarah's apartment. She was sitting on her couch, watching TV, totally unaware. The next screen over made my stomach drop out of my body. It was my efficiency apartment, my unmade bed, my guitar leaning in the corner, a camera hidden somewhere near my ceiling fan. He was watching us, all of us. On a small metal desk below the monitors was a thick black binder. I opened it, my hands shaking so badly I almost dropped it. It was full of handwritten notes and printed screenshots, detailed schedules of our lives. When we slept, what routes we drove to work, what we ate. But as I flipped through the section labeled Subject, Ryan, I realized it wasn't just stalking. It was worse. The notes were instructions. Subject has a slight limp in left leg when tired. Must mimic this. Voice pitch lowers significantly when stressed. Practice required. Subject rubs back of neck when lying. Remember this gesture. It wasn't a stalker shrine. It was study material. The heavy oak door behind me creaked shut. I spun around. Mr. Henderson was standing in the doorway of the hidden room. He wasn't angry. He just looked blank. His eyes seemed too wide in the blue light of the monitors, and he wasn't blinking. "You weren't supposed to see the prep work, Ryan," he said. His voice sounded strange, flat and digitized, like a high-quality recording of himself rather than speech coming from a throat. I backed up against the desk. "What is this? Why are you watching my apartment?" He tilted his head, a jerky, mechanical movement that didn't feel right at all. "I need to get it right this time. The Sarah replacement is almost ready for deployment, but you have tics that are harder to copy." He took a step forward into the blue light. "I'm tired of being Henderson. This suit is wearing out." Pure adrenaline dumped into my system. I shoved past him when my shoulder hit his chest. It felt strangely hard, like striking plastic beneath the fabric, and sprinted through the office, out the warehouse bay doors, and to my car. I didn't stop shaking until I was 3 towns over. I called the cops from an all-night diner. They went to the warehouse, but by the time they got there, the hidden room was empty. The monitors, the binder, Henderson, all gone. There was no trace of anything. I moved back in with my parents across the state. I got a new job doing landscaping, working outdoors in the sun. I thought I was safe, but yesterday, I got a letter in the mail with no return address. Inside was a single, grainy photo of me sleeping in my new bedroom here at my parents' house. On the back, written in handwriting that looked terrifyingly like my own, it just said, "Almost perfect." Story 3, the elevator stall. There is a specific kind of panic that sets in when you are dangling by a single cable in a dark metal box. Most people think about the falling, but for me, it was the silence that started to scream. If you have ever been stuck in an elevator, you know that first minute is just annoyance, but after the 5th minute, your brain starts showing you things you really wish it wouldn't. My name is Tyler. I live in a mid-rise apartment building on the edge of Seattle, one of those places that looks modern on the outside but has the original, shaky infrastructure from the 70s. I work as a night shift supervisor at a nearby warehouse, so my schedule is basically the opposite of the rest of the world. Coming home at 3:00 a.m. is my normal. Last Tuesday, I walked into the lobby, exhausted. The air was thick with that damp Pacific Northwest cold. I hit the button for the elevator, and the doors groaned open. Standing inside was a woman I recognized as Mrs. Gable from the 4th floor. She was a quiet, older lady, the kind who always had a plastic grocery bag in each hand and wore a floral headscarf even when it wasn't raining. I nodded and said, "Hey, Mrs. Gable, late night." She didn't look at me. She just stared at the corner of the elevator, her hands clutching those plastic bags so tight her knuckles were white. She gave a tiny, jerky nod but didn't say a word. I shrugged it off, thinking she was just tired, and pressed the button for my floor, the 7th. The elevator started to rise. It did that familiar, sickening lurch it always does between the 2nd and 3rd floors. But then there was a sound like a gunshot. A massive metal snap echoed through the shaft. The box shuddered, tilted hard to the left, and then stopped. The overhead light flickered, turned a sickly shade of orange, and stayed that way. We were stuck. I hit the emergency call button immediately. Usually, you get a bored operator or at least some static. This time, there was just a low, rhythmic thumping sound coming through the speaker. It sounded like someone hitting a stake with a hammer. "Hello," I yelled. "Hey, we are stuck between floors. Can you hear me?" The thumping stopped. A voice came through, but it was wrong. It was too high-pitched, like a child trying to imitate a man, and it sounded like it was whispering directly into my ear. "Tyler," the voice said, "you should have taken the stairs." My blood turned to ice. How did it know my name? I looked over at Mrs. Gable to see if she heard it. She was still staring at the corner, but now she was smiling. It wasn't a normal smile. It was wide, showing way too many teeth, and her eyes were bulging out. "Mrs. Gable," I whispered, backing into the opposite corner, "are you okay?" She started to hum. It was a low, vibrating sound that I could feel in my teeth. I pulled out my phone to call 911, but there was no service. Not just no bars, but the screen looked glitched out, with lines of red pixels cutting through the clock. Suddenly, I got a text. The sender was just a string of zeros. It read, "Do not look at her feet." I tried to tell myself this was a prank or a hallucination brought on by sleep deprivation. But then, I smelled it. A foul, metallic stench, like old blood and wet copper, filling the small space. Mrs. Gable shifted her weight. I tried to keep my eyes on her face, but my curiosity was like a physical weight pulling my head down. I looked. Mrs. Gable wasn't wearing shoes. Her feet weren't feet at all. They were long, gray, and ended in 3 jointed talons that were dug deep into the carpeted floor of the elevator. They looked like the legs of a massive, hairless bird. I let out a choked gasp and slammed my back against the doors. The woman finally turned her head toward me. Her neck made a series of loud, wet cracks as it rotated nearly 180 degrees. "She isn't here anymore, Tyler," the thing in the floral scarf said. The elevator suddenly dropped 10 feet. My stomach lurched into my throat. The doors creaked open just a few inches, jammed by the misalignment of the floors. Outside was darkness, but as the orange light from the elevator spilled out, I saw that the hallway wasn't a hallway. It was a wall of raw, poolsing meat. I realized then that this wasn't my building. I hadn't gone up. I had gone somewhere else. The thing that looked like Mrs. Gable began to uncoil itself. It grew taller, its spine clicking as it stretched toward the ceiling. I didn't think. I just acted. I jammed my fingers into the gap in the doors and pulled with everything I had. My fingernails tore, but the doors slid open just enough for me to squeeze through. I scrambled out into the darkness, landing on a surface that felt cold and slick. I didn't look back until I heard the elevator doors slam shut. I ran blindly through the dark, feeling the walls. They felt like cold stone now, not meat, until I found a heavy steel door. I burst through it and found myself in the basement of my actual apartment building. I ran all the way to the lobby. The night doorman, a guy named Marcus, looked at me like I was a ghost. "Tyler, what happened to your hands?" he asked, pointing at my bleeding fingers. I couldn't even speak. I just pointed toward the elevators. "The service guy is here now," Marcus said, looking confused. "The elevator stalled about 20 minutes ago. They just got it down to the lobby." I turned around. The doors to the elevator I had been in were open. The lights were bright and normal. A technician was standing inside, looking at the floor. "That's weird," the technician said, picking something up. He held up a floral headscarf. It was soaked in a thick black fluid that looked like ink. I moved out the next day. I live in a single-story house now. No stairs and definitely no elevators. But sometimes when I am lying in bed, I hear a low, vibrating humming coming from inside the walls. And I know that wherever that elevator went, it's still looking for